we should be live now. Let's see if correct screens are showing. So that's positive. And everyone's plopping in right about now. Perfect. All right, so what we're looking at is, this happens to be an Amazon Daily. And this is kind of a reflection of what we looked at last week. And in particular, we were talking about, right before the fiscal cliff, in fact, how many buyers were showing up into the scene. And it was interesting because you were seeing all this, wild gyration everyone was talking, but underneath it all we kept seeing going in from last week were just more and more bifractals. And, that's a good question I get often, what particularly is a bifractal? Um, but before we even get down to that thing, I want everyone to take an opportunity to look at the little chat setup and feel free. Let me go ahead and get rid of our Trade the MBI logo right there. I'm practicing with the new little features they have in the little control room. So please let me know that you can hear me, number one, and that we're talking in the right device. Looks like I'm getting movement there. So I will type in, can you hear me? And let's see if we get a response. I'll wait for at least someone to let me know that they can hear, and then I will proceed with showing some additional charts, and that will go from there. Okay. Minimize this setup. Okay, let me look at my control bar to make sure that our mixer settings are good. Adjust that there. I'll make sure I speak clearly into the microphone. Before, we had an issue where it was also recording the microphone from the actual monitor itself, which was interesting, but I don't think we're getting that. Let's take a look at an intraday chart so that we can get some more fast activity. That was our VIX chart from the daily. Nice look at gold. We'll make sure we've got everything. I think we were looking at PCLN earlier. Nice short from the beginning of the day. Red dot. Fractal guys came in. This was the target down below. And once they hit the target, sure enough, orange dot buy setup. Let me move this out of the way. You can see the orange dot buy setup. And that target is a little further up here. And what I'm thinking of doing for everyone, and it might make it easier, will be to have the price target show up above the dots. And that would give everyone an opportunity to clearly just see the price target above the dot. Likewise, I can do the same thing for the stop. And that might make the charts a little easier to read. If that's something that sounds interesting, I'll go ahead and do that. It's just a little bit of programming, nothing too dramatic. I'm sure I've got my intraday one. It might be right underneath all of these. There it is. Thought it was. Alright, let's take a look at an intraday. This happens to be 10 minute of MasterCard. And it was a good one because MasterCard was very bullish on it overall from its original setup. But intraday, look at that, beautiful. So let's go over a little bit of what we're looking at on the chart, just so we can be clear on it. Let me reduce the size of this one a little bit. I want to try and get the whole day in. There we go. Alright, so it started with a short signal. Pretty much everything in the market started with a short signal today. And I know that seems odd when you get this kind of a huge gap. It's not all that uncommon. We get it a lot. So what you see here was the decline, hit the target, then you start getting the buy setups coming across here. And oh yeah, okay, I've got my little screener going across. Type in your questions at any time down at the bottom of the screen, so that's good. Um, it's really interesting because this live stream actually literally gives you a studio. I could flip from camera to camera if it were necessary, but for what we're doing, it's just a matter of showing what our live charts are. And you should be, if you went to the live stream as opposed to the website, it gives you the option of adjusting your video quality, which is good depending on what your parameters are for your computer. Because we are broadcasting this in HD quality. Um, oh, you know what I was going to ask you? Oh, I was going to have my wife go ahead and make a broadcast of that we were actually on StockTwits earlier, going through just a ton of charts. So I figured we'd start going through more of those. A couple of things I wanted to go over though, real quickly, before we even begin. You know, it's always new to some people. You know, what is a bifractal? How do they come about? Oh, dear, I was going to ask if you would go on my StockTwits and just reiterate for everyone that we're live now. So what we've got here are cyan, orange dots. Each of these represents just different groupings. And what they are is the algorithm is hunting out particular patterns in the way purchases are being made, typically in the periods well prior to the actual signal. Um, and then by the time we get a signal, that's usually the point at which there's been enough of this definable pattern to go ahead and signal. And all different time frames, they'll come up, and what it represents is, you know, you'll often hear about someone saying, oh, they're at the Goldman desk and they're the player or the market maker, and you're going to have those in a variety of different locations. Well, the different colors you see are very specific setups that take place. It's not just one, and this is where I think a lot of some of the traditional indicators have a little difficulty in distinguishing between what is really oversold and what is really overbought, and by what standard and by whose. You know, like I've said before, these guys will hit a target, and then all of a sudden we get a bifractal. It's not a coincidence. Um, they have their specific idea of what they're looking for, whether it's intraday, daily, or whatever. And some people will think, oh, you know, it's going to go to the moon, and then all of a sudden it reverses on them, and they don't understand why. I'll give specific targets and say, hey, you know, it hits your target, you better put in your stop or get out. Either way, you got to be ready to make your move. Because these guys, they're just in it for the money. They're not emotional about this. They're not tied to whichever stock you like the most or think has got the best fundamentals. I'm not even sure they care about fundamentals. No evidence in what I see from what they do on a daily basis suggests that. They literally have uh, what I call a couple of concepts in mind, and you might want to refer to it as like the random walk theory, which basically says, you know, the market, all the information that is known is going to cause price to do what price is going to do, and you can't really predict anything about it. And that's kind of the approach that these guys take with, okay, it made a particular move. Where am I going to trade within that move? Um, and a lot of times, the bigger overall picture from the daily and that gives us a broader perspective. I mean, for Apple, it was pretty clear that we were looking for um, that 555 target. We talked about it for weeks, but like I said weeks ago when we first talked about this, it's going to take a long time to get there. And while that intraday chart takes a little while to get up there, let's talk about some of the ones that we went over last week and or even on Monday. Um, we were attracted to FSLR. Why? Okay, let's look at this extreme histogram here. And this is the setup that you see for your extreme histogram. And it's relationship to just a zero line. So if you imagine looking at your typical MACD histogram, and they would have that moving above and below a zero. Well, the way I design the extreme histogram is the ratio fractals that it's looking for are so minute that, oh gosh, I think they went to 4 zeros before we even got a number. Okay, so that wasn't practical to be able to display that for you. So putting it in this format gives us some relationship. Now I like to put it over price. You don't have to. But there are a couple of key elements to it. One is the zero line. It was never supposed to go positive. So when you reach these positive readings like you saw here, you've reached clearly overbought conditions. Okay, so that becomes very definitive. However, while overbought, it has to be within the context of what has overall happened within the price from an extreme oversold, or is this overbought after it has already made a move? Because if I scroll back, we can find a red trend, hopefully, and going from a red trend to a green trend, you get momentum. It's normal, and it carries through and it follows up. And in this particular case, you ended up with your positive extreme after about 5 bars, and that usually becomes the threshold. Um, it doesn't matter where it is during the week, because it's just 5 trading days roughly. And you get a lot of people. I'm not even sure. I don't really do much research for that on Elliott Wave or anything like that, but there are clearly cycles. I mean, I see them within our shakeout indicator down here. 3 to 5 moves, and typically, if you're particularly if you're in an ascent, um, you start to get a rollover after that period, and then you look for that next roll coming back, and that's kind of why stocks tend to look like the little roller coasters, and it's just these little patterns running up and down. But when we had green trend and dipped below the red line on FSLR, that was very attractive. And you can see it back here happened, gosh, that was 10:05. All right, so fast forward to here, and when we were talking about what we wanted to trade coming into this week, um, you know, this looked very good. Didn't hurt that on Monday, put in additional bifractals right here, and literally met that target. So some people were, I was talking about it. What is your upside target? It's like I already put it on here for you. I mean, it was at 32.40. Okay, well, price is down to 31.80. Yeah, the target was 32.40. You're supposed to be a seller at 32.40. You can hold on to it. I mean, overall, it's still a bullish setup in general, but you can see where we've gone from overbought over here to oversold, dipping below the red line, to now positive extreme again, overbought again. It happens. Now, the interesting thing about it is, unfortunately, throughout the market, we're seeing just a myriad of overbought conditions instantly, and it's not because the market moved as much as it did. We didn't get overbought on Monday on the huge move. It just happened immediately upon this giant gap up here. So let's go look at our intraday. It should have come up. There's Apple 10-minute. Okay, so I went over this, pretty clearly when I posted. We ended up with the, oh, yeah, what is the yellow line here? This is the ATR. I just put it over price because it makes it easy for us to identify. So when I plop it up and you see a dot and it says 3.86 ATR, it's not hard for us to get the target. We know that we can multiply the close times the ATR times 1.236 if you want to get really into the technical aspect of it. And that's where the little dot pops up. Okay, that's it. Pretty straightforward. Now, in this particular case, I printed this chart out and I put the little values over the dot. Well, we're moving along here, and all of a sudden, what do we get? Red dot short signal. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Yes, they had their target. These guys actually got theirs met. The earlier ones for the green didn't quite get enough of a momentum push off of it. Well, and that's why I showed, and let's put the line, where the shakeout indicator comes into play. And we want a trend line here. So it was right here, and look at the difference. Alright, so you've got this trend line shows you that even though price was coming back up here, horrible as far as getting back up to the same level. It just meant that you still ended up with more sellers. Now, we know that overall, the reason behind this, the 78-minute chart still has a short signal. Okay, so when we're looking at the broader time frame, you have to understand the context. If you want to trade a 10-minute chart, you better know what's going on both from a daily standpoint as well as from, you don't have to use 78 minute. I do 78 minute because it breaks the day into 5 equal parts. You could do a 60 minute. You're just going to end up with that half bar at the end of the day. Well, so what? It's still relatively the same, and the overall concept is going to be pretty close. So when this red dot short comes in here, let's expand this up a little bit and take a closer look at what that actually means, because we can just click right over the price, and you can see the ATR is 2, okay, roughly, right into that. Now, right after this red dot short, we get a second short signal, which is the gray dot. Now, you just all watch that happen. We literally closed, and you get another bifractal. So the green guys weren't happy that they didn't get their full target before. Let a little bit of that short move come back in, and then they want to jump into it. So this has become an interesting little battle here at Apple. And I think it's because now, if we take a look at a daily chart of Apple, and let's do that one real quick while we're here. Oh, there's Facebook. I'll switch this one over. But again, we had buy signals from Facebook. It made also that green dip, put in a GAM, which is our gradient algorithmic multiplier, one of the earliest fractals discovered there, coming off the MBI, and that was very bullish. We were very bullish overall for Facebook, and even have much higher targets. But let me just change this one, and we'll call it Apple. So AAPL. Because now we're going to get into a situation, and it's going to confuse a lot of people going forward, because you're going to have a lot of stocks now that are kind of overbought, and you're going to start to see some moving closer to where they have a, I don't want to say real short signal, but some of them are even getting closer to actual short signals. What I want to do is minimize this real quick before I go on to that, and I want to close this chart real quick. I'm going to free up some processor speed, because running at this HD, along with, gosh, I have about 600 charts open right now, so it takes up a lot of processor. Yeah, we can put up Win. We'll put up a lot of the different ones. I want to go through some of the specific concepts as it relates to when I put up these charts on StockTwits, what I want you to be looking for, so that you get a clearer idea. All right, so here was our daily of Apple, and way back here, started cascading forward, and let me just remove this so we don't have all these extra lines. We'll just disable that. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit so we get a broader perspective, because it's always good to have this broader perspective. Alright, from a daily standpoint, we got our first short signals back here at 700. Okay, this was a point where I remember reading everyone talking about, okay, it's going to 800. And I've learned my lesson. I don't really talk much about shorting Apple from a daily standpoint for broad down targets, because you catch a lot of enthusiasts who don't necessarily want to hear what's going on. And then when we broke down, we ended up with a nice buy signal right over here that we had a little pop from it, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, we got to short it again. And people were like, what? And it just got ugly. And what the problem was is that we started to see a decay in the shakeout indicator down here from a daily standpoint. And once you get to below this minus 12, and it's always a key for when you're looking at my charts, because I typically will put up a chart that has the shakeout, sometimes the power momentum, not always, but usually the expanded ratio histogram, and sometimes even my up and down power, which will give us a relationship between an overall balance between longs and shorts. Okay, so that gives you a general concept. But here you can see that just from a trend change, okay, the color of the chart, that becomes the simplest, basic part of when you see me put up a chart. Is the trend green or is it red? Okay, if it's red, you have to expect to be looking, when you see a signal, to be capturing some type of a discount. Now, the formula I've used for that discount is typically when I get a bifractal in red trend, and it's usually off of a little bit of a pop, and I know I'm below my minus 12, I'm looking for at least 1/3 to a half in those particular situations of that signal that came in. That means even if I get a little bit of a pop up, I'm not buying that one. I'm waiting for a decline that gets to that half point, and then I'm usually starting with putting my buy entry at that close where the original signal came in. And from there, I begin to trade on. And that's from a daily standpoint. Intraday, it can be a little bit more active with it, but I still look for the exact same overall setups. No difference. And so when we came back over here, we had the nice pop, and we ended up with a gray dot short, but we were also overbought. And this kind of gives you a good depiction of what the extreme histogram does, where all of a sudden I'm in red trend, we got oversold, we had been oversold, had stayed oversold, but you could see that we had lost all the support from big institutional buyers, as we could see from our shakeout where we dipped way below here. All right, we further knew this because if we go to my expanded ratio histogram without getting into a lot of that detail, the longer it stays below this cyan line with the orange, you're in an exacerbated downtrend. It maintains itself. So in this particular case, we had little bifractals show up right here on Apple, and it was getting to a point where, unfortunately, we just dipped back down below the negative 12 again. So we still had the 555 upside target, but I told people this is going to take weeks to resolve. That you're going to get these upfits, and then it's going to come back and retrace. Because every time you dip below this red line I have marked here, you're going to retrace those lows. And sure enough, we did that. Came up, popped for a little bit. These guys got their targets hit, and then we rolled over again. We got our buy signals. Is where I was telling everyone at that point to buy weekly options. That was on a going into the end week, and it popped real quick, but you know, it almost reached the overbought really fast. Now look at Apple again. Now the difference is, here's where it gets interesting. You'll say, oh yeah, well it's got the same pop near overbought. Not the same. Look at where your shakeout is now. So we went from these negative 20s to negative 8. That shows you how fast people decided to jump back into this setup. Now, these bifractal guys had already been logging on to here. They had not gotten out of this setup. So they had just been looking to accumulate shares. And it takes a while for them to get what they're looking for. They usually want to break down, hit the low. And in this particular case, Monday, they took out the low on a higher extreme. That was very positive, even at the start of the day. It was a clear signal on Monday that that was a positive, and then boom, it exploded from there. So we hit that 555 target. Is that the end of the day? No, you still have this additional one that's a little bit higher, but yeah, clearly overbought from a daily standpoint. No question about that. So here we go back to our 10-minute. Now, let me go ahead and draw a line. We'll just put a horizontal line in because we wanted to show where the short setup was. Now, you'll always see that I color them red for short, yellow for buy, and the target for short would be magenta, and a target for a long would be in the cyan. And that just makes it clear. So if we go over the price tag right there, it says the down target was 544.61. So did we reach 544.61? Yeah, we ended up with 544.45, and right after that, boom, you get a buy target. Okay, so now we got a new bifractal that comes in after that short, and that up target is 547.07. So we can go back now and change the colors, just like that. So this one becomes cyan, and now you begin to see that, boy, have they kind of decided on a little bit of a range here going into this. These guys want to buy at this particular level, and this was sort of an attempt at shorting a double top. That was kind of early, actually, I thought, but you could see that there were far less buyers overall, so they were taking advantage of the fact that they were seeing less buy interest from this move on Apple, which I think is kind of telling because with this positive of the market move, you would have expected maybe a little bit more from Apple to the upside. So I think that's telling. Let me go ahead and flip it to a 78-minute, and while it's calculating that setup, we will take a look at some other dailies. I know I talked about, there's the Apple daily, but let me go ahead and flip this one. I want to go to LVS, because I had liked gaming going in, but then again, it's interesting because, like I was mentioning, I was on with StockTwits, actual StockTwits, the official, and we were talking about how bullish last week everything I got, even though there was this huge, massive dump in price. I was like, my church was just inundated with buy signals. Everybody bought during that decline, and when I say everybody who knew or had an expectation of what was going to happen. So I thought it was very interesting in that flush that we were seeing all these buy signals last week. going into this fiscal cliff. And, this always begs the question, who would have thought that, Republicans were going to cave on that? Well, I pose that sometimes these guys know in advance what's going to happen. And if, was it a guess? Could have been, doesn't matter. They still showed up. And they still showed up in a serious way. I mean, they can go through chart after chart. And I posted just a ton of them on StockTwits, just even today. They just showed them. I mean, they were all there, both Monday as well as last week, for the initial stages of it. So here was LVS. Now, nice buy setups with that. Ended up with another buy setup on Monday. Shoots through that target, but look at that positive extreme. Okay, now, this far into, this green trend, everything's looking good. We get oversold on this little dip here in green trend, and that becomes very attractive. Now, how many times do we just see that? Like 5 other charts I just showed, FSLR, GS, I've shown them all. They all had the same dip. I think it was even Google had the same one. We'll have to look at that one in a minute too. But now, that's a huge positive. To get a plus 34 from this indicator is just crazy. I mean, I'll squeeze this chart in here and you can see. Okay, and this is what I talk about. I can get rid of price, and we can sit here and talk about this. All right, I can talk about oversold, pop, overbought, oversold, dips down below. Oh, overbought. Oh, overbought again to an extreme. Here you would have gotten your first indication, but switching from red to green trend, usually you let it go for a couple of days on that. You usually put a stop in place, and then I look for my next positive extreme. But then rolled over again, got oversold, popped back up. And so you can just see all these oversold setups develop right within here. Now this is a good one right there that it shows where you were in green trend. And let me zoom in for you real quick, just like that. You go from green trend to red trend, dip below. You got to trail that lower. So even though you end up with these bifractals coming in here, you're not jumping on those to buy them. Okay, you got to look for your retrace setup within that. Where that becomes different is when you've reached an extreme oversold, and you end up with your GAMs and these kinds of setups going forward. But even with this nice buy setup that happened just a little while ago, you ended up with all the ducks in a row. Okay, got a little overbought, kind of held flat for a little while, and then boom, exploded, but got overbought again. So this is just a pattern that you see with LVS, but you see it on a lot of them, and some are clear, some a little more obvious. The more liquid the stock, the cleaner the setups. I mean, the setups I get from Dow stocks are usually always very clean. So here was Win, same concept. We ended up with our nice bifractal again. I was very interested when it dipped below the red line. I was looking for at least an attempt at that low retrace. Turned red trend right at that point, but you reset your shakeout right there. And very nice. Boom. Cat, yeah, we'll put up Cat in a little bit too. And so this is a nice little play from there. The GAM came in as well. Easy way to target that one would be just to take a general high-low for that GAM was about a little over $3 for an upside projection there. So 115 range. So here we are hitting 118. Not bad. Normally what I do is you could take the high-low range, multiply it by the 1.23, and that would give you a full target. Let's go ahead and just whip out a calculator and do it for the fun of it. Alright, had to turn it on. So, high-low range, I'm just going to say it's 350, just for the sake of argument. Multiply it by our 1.236, that would be $4.32 added to 112 would be just under 117 was what the target was based on that GAM. So not bad, it's fine. Nice reset of the shakeout here, but here's your problem. Okay, you're reaching new highs. Now, it's okay, you've got a positive extreme. That means at a minimum you're going to have a retest of this low at 115.88 going forward. The fact that we were in red trend moving to green trend means you're not jumping at the bit to short this one. And this is where people often get confused because they think a big move, got to short it immediately. Not the case. Alright, so now that we've moved from this particular case on Win, here's your problem. This shakeout, is it likely to get up to at least the same level even though you've already exceeded price? Probably not. So what's going to happen when I get my first lower shakeout reading? That's going to be the opportunity to jump into a short for a much bigger move to the downside. And at that point, you're probably likely to see some kind of short setup within it. So let's go back to our 78-minute chart of Apple. We should have gotten there by now. Oh, did not click for me. Why is that? Oh, my interval is not. Alright, so let me show you this one. This is the radar screen that we get with TradeStation. And they're still offering that offer of 60 days to try out their platform. I've told people, and I sent out a bunch of them just this last week. You get the TradeStation, you direct message me. I'll let you have the indicators for a week plus to try them out, and you can see what they're like on a chart. I mean, how much easier does it get than that? And you can go from there. So what I do on a radar screen is, and I can hook up all my alerts to this, and it will give me audio, text, email, or even speak to me if I choose to, have that recording play, and it can tell me what signal came in. But in general, I mean, I just have all the different stocks time frames, and because I've linked both the interval and the stock, you can go through them pretty easily. So let's go ahead and click Apple 78-minute again now, and this time it will change. And while we'll do that, let's go over another one. We wanted to look at CAT real quick, so we'll go ahead and go to CAT. Using up a ton of processing power, giving you HD signal here. Alright, so Caterpillar. Alright. Now that's interesting. Nice short setup. Caterpillar into the green trend right here. Typically you would look for discount. So that would mean, in this particular case, that's a short for Caterpillar. Straight up. Don't even have to think about it at this particular point. Target range on that one is going to be an interesting one. Having just flipped from there, downside target, gosh, you would want to retrace all the way back into the mid-80s range for that, so that would be pretty significant. That's quite a drop-off. Now, when I look at my power momentum on this one, very interesting setup. It was very weak here, but let me tell you one thing that you don't normally see on power momentum, and that is this blue down here going into a negative. That's not supposed to happen. Doesn't happen. When it does happen, you back up the truck and you buy. That's what you do, because that anomaly lets you know right there that you've got a very interesting oversold situation. Now, you're looking at your chart thinking, that little teeny bar, right here, super oversold, and I should be buying that? Yeah, absolutely. The fact that it was coming off a fact right here of a retrace of this low, and let's just enlarge this because this is a great example. I mean, talk about a perfect one. Green dot dips below the red, looked for a little bit of a discount, and bingo. That's higher extreme, lower price, perfect match, and then boom, explosion right off of it. Now, for me, an ideal setup with the short would be to look for the ratio between the power momentum here when you see this chart having the yellow move above. So you see how it can go this nice move, but as soon as you get the yellow going above, you know you've got a little bit more inherent weakness built into it. And then for me, I look at my expanded ratio histogram. If the yellow were above right here, I would be expecting a much deeper short. But in this case, no, the orange was above, and now you have just the opposite, where the yellow is above the orange in this case. So that is clearly means to me that we should see a little bit more of a pullback in Caterpillar after the enormous move. And that's not because it's just a giant move. It's just that's how many people are going to get fooled by that setup, and they're going to want to get into it in a hard way. So going back to our Apple 78-minute, we can squeeze down here. So let's get rid of that average true range. So short signal came in, and you might be looking at this short signal and thinking, well, what about this one? It didn't work out. Well, we talked about this one because it had also the buy setup within it as we were moving over from an intraday, and as soon as this bar closed, we kind of flipped over to a green trend from the setup, and it became actually very, it was still a decent move to the lower side, but even at that point, when this bar closed, you knew that the trend had changed to green, and that was an opportunity to get out of the short setup at that particular point, because all you were looking for at this point when the gray dot came in was a retest of the low. It happened in the very next bar, but needless to say, I mean, the trend had flipped, and it was moved over to the green side. Now, opens up, red dot short, And bingo, your intraday move is now got to fight this longer term short setup. And they're doing just fine. Let me move this one lower so we can see where those targets are. And I'll just highlight over it. So 539 was the overall decline target from the close in that particular setup. And for me, in the green trend like this, if we look at our extreme, let me put it over price again. So that extreme is positive 34. Well, we just saw that same positive 34 on LVS, as well as even the Caterpillar one was pretty extreme as well. So pretty high up there as far as an overbought setup. But now, like I've pointed out, 78-minute chart, it can take a day or more to resolve. Particularly coming off of this move, you're far enough now into the green trend that this actually becomes a legitimate signal. And it was a pretty decent decay that we had after that secondary bar. We're finally maybe seeing an improvement in this shakeout from here. We were at plus 23, then we went down to 16, and this one's now 17. So this is our first, if this bar closes, would be higher. That's our trend line from the other one. You do see, though, that there are more shorts into this setup from the power mode because the yellow is above the cyan here, so it came and reached its peak. Maybe it doesn't give the full retrace at the beginning, but definitely would have to keep an eye on it. So that's the pressure that the 10-minute chart is under, but it doesn't preclude me from taking 10-minute ones. It just means that you need to be cognizant of the fact that you could have your retrace and you want to make sure you follow your stops when you're trading the shorter time frame. So it doesn't stop you from trading your shorter time frames for the bullish moves. And we still get plenty of the signals, my goodness. Let me go look at how many alerts have gone out so far today. 225. So that's an enormous amount of signals overall. I'll slide this through here for you. You can take a look at them. So these are just some of the signals from my standpoint. Let me squeeze it in there so you can see the times. That's coming in West Coast time. It's just one of the realities of living out in sunny Southern California, and what a beautiful day it is out here. Oh my goodness! So just ringing out signals from way back. Now this was a Baidu signal that we're looking at down at the bottom here. I scroll it up. So it was an orange dot buy for Baidu, 10-minute. That came in just a few minutes ago. And again, pretty much tells you everything you need to know right here. The most important part is you're looking at trend is green, and I got a 10-minute buy. Am I going to look for a discount or anything? No, because it's in green trend, and it's a buy signal. So that's a pretty straightforward one right there. Should we go ahead and take a look at the Baidu chart? Why not? Let's go see it. So I go over my trusty little radar screen. I'll slide over and show you exactly how I do it. So we can click Baidu 10-minute, and it's going to go ahead and change the screen. I can do that for any of them. So as you can see, a lot of green on these. Oh, we should take a look at FAS. I know we had some signals on FAS. And at the bottom of my setup, if I scroll it up higher here, give it a second to process a little bit more. And I think at the bottom of it here, we can see that I have some of the other ones we looked at. We put SLV on the dot alerts just the other day. We also looked at gold and CMG, as well as CLF, WLT, and that. And I've been very bullish on a lot of those commodity plays because they're extremely oversold from their positions, and I could easily see 100, 200% returns on those without any trouble. All right, so here's your Baidu 10-minute live. It's happening right now. Squeeze it just a fraction, get the whole day in. Okay, so we started the day with a gray dot short. Now, gray dot shorts typically start out with just looking for a low retrace. They're really effective when they're on a higher close. But in this case, that's not a whole lot of range. But typically what you can do from there is you can put in a stop if you want to short it and look for the bigger target for the ATR. Now, for those who had the indicators, you'd be looking for a retrace of the low because of the positive extreme here. And again, let's look at what that number is. 58. Wow, that's way overdone. 58. That's extreme. So sure enough, it retraced that extreme, no problem. But then you start to get your little bisignals. So you know, with this first bifractal right back here, and the second one here. But look at that shakeout. Those are over 25. Now, when you get over this purple line here at over 25, you've reached a point where every single one of those histograms from this point on had better stay above the yellow line. Otherwise, you've got problems. Um, and it doesn't necessarily indicate that you're going to have a sell-off, because this is where you then turn to your up-down powers, like your power momentum. Am I seeing any yellow popping up over these cyan bars? No, I did right here. It's the first time. So here you actually have seen what would be considered a little bit more of a sell-off. And at this particular point, if you can get a dip down to the cyan line here on the extreme, you actually have reached oversold and a very bullish setup within a power day like this. And a lot of times people have trouble with trending days, because they can't see what is overbought and oversold, because your standard indicators, stochastics, all of these other ones, RSI, they just remain overbought and they don't fluctuate. This is why I don't have any range bound indicators that allows that freedom. Now you can see that this orange dot sitting above the cyan is exactly the opposite of what we were seeing on the Apple Daily from a trend standpoint. This lets us know that we have a very positive uptrend and we want to be looking for discounts to buy. Well, we had our little oversold, and look at how fast Baidu became almost overbought here as it reaches the peak. And this is just like a bar later. So, 2 bars later here, and you go from, a near oversold to an overbought. And that can happen pretty quick. But what I'm liking is the reset in the shakeout. So you've gone from well above the purple line, get below. What I like to get is usually a dip down below the yellow line, which is about 15. And what you'll often see in that is you'll have this nice huge up move, and then you get like this big whoosh bar. And what that does is that usually will reset our shakeout, get us pretty close back to near a 0 point where we can then build a new histogram back to the upside as like a recalibration. But it's not looking particularly great for this 10-minute signal at this point. I think you may get more like this one where it just trades across because you're already kind of overbought. Though that's not looking for a huge target. Let's see what the actual numbers are. Alright, so the signal came in at 103.13 and it's targeting 103.40. Nothing I can do about that. That is just what the range of the stock is doing. I'll get people say, well, I want to get 45 cents, I want to get 50 cents. Okay, well, you can go ahead and look for your 45, 50 cents, but these fractal setups, they have their specific targets. That's all they're targeting. And a much lower than the last signal that came in over here. So you can see the change in the dynamic has them looking for a lower target within the setup. And oftentimes you will see a conglomerate of the same colored dots building up over a period of time. That happens a lot. They'll target a particular stock or at a particular range, and that's usually because they're looking to get an average weighted price. And everyone thinks that these mutual fund guys that can only do one thing, buy, and that. Well, that may be true to some degree, but they're going to do it in at least a specific order because they can still trade in and out of overall positions. They just tend to get a net increase from what they're doing overall, and that's what we tend to see in some of these smaller targets compared to much broader ones. Any particular stocks that I haven't shown recently that you want to look at? And we can take a look at some of these unique setups because I know that I was very keen to point out, like on the Apple intraday when we were looking at it, specifically about the yellow line dipping below our blue line on the shakeout because that became a very telltale sign of what was about to happen with the overall stock. Let me go to a 10-minute of FAS. Oh, you want to look at Google? Sure, let's put Google up. There's a Google Daily. Alright, so Google Daily, that's a nice looking chart, wasn't it? Squeeze it a little bit. I got lots of Google's, PCLN. We'll look at those. Not a problem. So the Google chart, squeeze it out from a daily standpoint. You can see it's been running through a lot of little red trend. We ended up with some nice little buy signals going through there. Let me go ahead and move my extreme histogram because I really want you to get used to seeing the extreme histogram over price. I know it's unusual, um, but from a quick visual, it will help you when you look at the charts and all of a sudden you see the extreme up like this from being down here, and you know that you've gotten into a situation where they go overbought really fast. And then you look for a quick decline in it as your opportunity to buy in from the setup. So you can see here we have the nice move up on Google, and then all of a sudden Google gets oversold with just this tiny move down. And this is where people don't see it. And this is where you'll find me get into a lot of dialogue with people who are telling me that it's about to break down, and I'm giving you a buy signal. And I think we had this happen with PCLN on daily, and a lot of good traders. I'm not, don't get me wrong. These guys are technical analysis. I've done it for decades too. Um, Everything about that says sell. I mean, it's no different than when I told you that we had the MACD daily for the market was giving a sell signal at the very time where I'm saying I'm seeing all these buyers, and then they needed that liquidity of forcing those guys out in order to fill their pockets and not look like they bought into it. And this is why most people didn't see the buying setup going into this fiscal cliff, and it was confusing for them. And I understand that, and that's part and parcel why I created a lot of these. Now, from a 10-minute standpoint on the ES, there you go. You can see that building from a lot of the buy setups. And oh my goodness, I just, speaking of the ES real quick, I had a member who's been utilizing my daily Opus, and he came up with some unbelievably profitable intraday tick setups. I mean, we're talking 85% win rates on a 1000 tick chart for the ES with 2.6 profit factors. Phenomenal stuff. In fact, I may even have that still on here. Oh yeah, you know what? He even gave me one. I don't know. Do any of you people trade the dollar or euro? Let me open one of those. Here it is. All right, so this is basically a general performance report. Let me shrink it a little bit. This is some crazy stuff that he was sending me. So, performance report, I'll slide it over so that we can get a look at it. Okay. Let me change the margin on that. Alright, so here's what this one was. This happens to be my MBI Opus strategy, and if I scroll that over there, you can see, maybe not, I have to enlarge it right there. This is the euro, and it's a 30-minute chart. So this was back a little ways. So let's go ahead and take a look at what these numbers are real quick before I go on to the dailies of Google and that. So getting a 3.08 profit factor, and look at that win rate, 81%. And this is trading my MBI Opus setup, and this is it comes with the indicators that I give everybody, but I had not taken the time yet to apply it to some of these. I mean, he's applied it to that, to copper, gold. I think we've got GC futures here. So, pretty incredible stuff. Let's see, this one is, I think, going to be gold. Reduce that one. So it gives us performance report, and we just click it. And it also has the settings. So you can go through and punch in these settings. Typically what I do is I'll put these on the website for those that have the indicators, and you can just go ahead and fill in the exact same settings. So here you go. This is GC 1000 tick for those that follow that symbol, and 81.82% win rate, 3.06 profit factor. Very nice indeed. So this is just some of the things that you can do with it. I mean, while I created the overall Opus setups and that for the major indexes, certainly applicable to all of these individual ones. So Google, from that daily standpoint, we ended up last week with orange dot buy signal, and boom, shot up in an oversold setup here with the close on Monday, and gaps up over the target. And at that particular point, do you have to take it? Yeah, you do. Because not really completely overbought. And this is actually one of the rare ones that's not. You'll notice that that's still negative on the differential there, negative 8.89. That's overbought because inside of -8 is typically right at the threshold of overbought, but it's not extreme. So it's not one of those situations where you have to expect this low to retrace, where you might see that on a lot of the others, where as we move across here in this extreme overall setup, that you would expect those to retrace overall. So let's see if the FAS 10 minute. All right, so a lot of good signals today from the FAS from a 10-minute standpoint. Very attractive. Look at that orange dot buy here, another one here, and another one here. So you can see who's playing in this setup overall. Nearly reaching that target right there. Got right up to the max on it, and that was pretty attractive. Let's also put back up the PCLN. So I think I have 10-minute of PCLN. Alright, that was the 15-minute we looked at from the buy setup starting there. From a 10-minute, a little more attractive. You can see the green dot, orange dot. And should be some exciting things for dot alerts next week. I'm probably going to be eliminating the 30-minute range, and that way it'll make it overall cheaper for full range, as well as because so many people enjoyed having all of them for the week period. I'll probably be reinstituting that one, so that you can get all stocks, all time frames during the week. And by eliminating at least the 30-minute range, we'll reduce the number of emails on a daily basis, and that still give you the 10, 15-minute to get a short-term read, and then your overall longer 78-minute. And I'm still working on putting together one that will give you daily signals as well. Because it would be nice, because it's always good to be able to know, okay, yeah, I've got all these buy signals for PCLN or whatever. In fact, let's go ahead and look at the PCLN daily, because this was a hotly debated topic where a lot of people did not agree with the buy signals that I was getting. And for just this reason right here, you had this gap. And the suggestion was is that anytime there's a decrease in these setups, that you should have gap fill. And unfortunately, with that, I took exception, because it's like it happens. Yes, you get a lot of gap fills, but why? Why is this gap going to fill versus another gap? What are the dynamics going into there? And these were the questions I started asking, particularly like when it came to Fibonacci's as well. It's like, okay, if I run a Fibonacci on here, let's go ahead and do it. I hadn't done it recently here, so let's see. Alright, so in this particular case, it came to the 38%, but here you broke below the 38%, but it didn't go to the 50%. So at this point of the break of the 38%, should you have been selling? In this particular case, I was suggesting you should be buying with the green dot buy signals. Alright, you fast forward here, we broke below the 38%, came down to the 50%, didn't break it, but then it broke it over here. So, should we have been exiting as soon as it closed below the 50% on this day and then dipped down here? Wasn't seeing that, and that's why some people were saying, "Oh, I'm waiting for gap fill to buy," and I'm like, "Well, you're gonna be waiting a while," and that's just because we could see that these buyers were coming into the setup, and in this particular case, we had the red trend with the red dot, and I'm like, "You got to look for your discount." So we were down here somewhere around the 613 range or whatever, and it became very clear when we ended up with this MBI orange dot, and then moved across over here. We got the pop, and I said, okay, when we get this buy signal, you want to trail this one lower, because we're likely to retest this low below the red line. And some people had an issue with that, and I don't know why, because in the red trend you want to get discount. Um, you got to wait for it. When you're talking about dailies, these things take time. Now, what was very different about PCLN compared to like an Apple setup, and why I was so different about the expectations, look at the shakeout. Barely reached a -8 in these particular areas right in here. It was hugely bullish, and then when we made the second wave lower, we finally got down to where, and this is what I was talking about with some of them, where you get the yellow below the blue line, and then as soon as you get your first up move, well, in this particular case, that was at this particular spot right here, but we had reached kind of a peak. Well, we did the second move, coming back down here, you had the positive. Now, could you have still, put in your buy setup in this particular case? Yeah. Would you have been stopped out? No, because the stop was all the way down here, the 589 level. You would have gotten very close. You would have been like sweating it a little bit, which if you had trailed this lower, you would not be sweating it at all because you'd be like, okay, as soon as it pops back up, I'm going to get filled and it'll go on from there. What became really interesting with it is we converted right about here from the power momentum, and that was the earliest buy setup within this overall configuration. And then last week we ended up with the additional bifractals, the same guys adding in at this exact spot, and that was the giveaway. And from there, no surprise to hit the target. Now we didn't hit the target on Monday, which was interesting. Let's zoom back in. So that target, if I slide this up here, you can see the catfish and the orange, 627.26. And where did we end up? We ended up with 623 as the high, and it closed at 620. So still had room even for both setups to make. So gap higher, is it worth taking that gain? Sure. That was a piece of cake. Not for a lot of people because, really from a technical analysis, I guess I'd have to bring on, and maybe I'll do that for another chart when we do another live broadcast setup, will be to include some of the older traditional indicators. Yeah, no, good question. When I am trailing it lower and I am looking for key setups, I'm looking for a setup like this particular one here where you dip below cyan line and then the next day it pops up. I become very interested, and at that particular point, I would be putting my buy entry right at that high point on this particular one, looking to get caught in. The only thing that would have had me still a little cautious was the fact that the power momentum in this particular case didn't have a better ratio. I would have been more interested right here when the ratio, not only was the number low, but the relationship between these two last numbers. And when you see my charts go up, you can look at that ratio. And what you want to see is that shrinking, the distance between the yellow and the cyan, where the cyan then moves above, really becomes your, sort of lock-in moment where you're like, okay, yeah, they've pretty much shaken everyone out. And then going to the shakeout itself and saying, okay, have I breached, a point where, like, am I moving towards minus 20, minus 25, minus 30? Then you got to be cautious, and you're not going to be interested because, or if you want to be interested, that's when I usually tell people, okay, move to options. Okay, so in this particular case, it's like, no, I'm happy with actual shares. And definitely want to buy on any of the little discounts that I'm provided, particularly on this setup, because here's what I tell you to do with this. Okay, you got your high and your low. So in this particular case, $8. So okay, fine, round it to 9. You would want to be looking for around a $3 discount from 609. So around 606 was what you were looking for. Went down to 601. You know, and that's not hard to do. Is just to put your entry in there. Once it reached that level, you put your entry at the close, and you can continue to trail it down. Or in this particular case, because you've got enough of that discount, you can then go ahead and buy your option because you're not buying on an up move. And I don't buy calls when price is moving higher. I buy when price is moving lower for obvious reasons. Because once you get a momentum move, you're already paying too much for your premium. It already is skyrocketed. Your implied volatility and everything else changes, so it's just not worth it. I'm not going to get into the details of the deltas and everything else. But that's how you would utilize it, particularly playing the options with these kind of situations. So very unique. Yeah, there are two sets of numbers. Okay, so let's go over what those sets of numbers are on the power momentum real quick. Let me just squeeze these down, and we'll go over them. Okay, so the first two numbers represent this setup right up here. The last two represent the relationship between the histogram that you see down below. And so in the relationship for the histogram, what I'm looking for is in particularly these kind of declines, and particularly when I get into exacerbated moves. So for instance, you'll notice that price is at matching levels, but notice how much lower that overall histogram is. It means you've pretty much exhausted anyone who's out there to sell, and they're having a hard time acquiring shares. And this is where double bottom breaks, very popular. I love to look for those. I mean, you get people who look for them for like MACD divergences and things like that. Those can be effective, but more so here because this is just a subtle break of the low where everyone thought, oh no, it's going to fall apart. And believe me, I mean, I had more than a few people, saying to me, okay, no, yeah, sorry, buddy, you're breaking down. It's not going to work to the upside. And it's just like, it's okay, just relax. We're still seeing the overall buy setup. I was not in the least bit daunted. Um, I know a couple people when this made the original pop right here, they were like, "Oh, it's only because the market moved higher." And I'm like, you're fine with that because I was expecting a little bit of a pullback from this overbought setup and a retested low anyway. And I had mentioned that, and we can go back and look at the thread on Stock Twitch. You'll see it. Nothing to hide about that. That was pretty straightforward. And the same with this upside projection. But see here, the last two, you can see that it was right about here that I can't get this up high enough to be able to show that really reducing price. So let me just slide these all the way up and we'll just go solely on power momentum right here. So there you can see it. So on this particular day, the power momentum had the yellow at 9 and the blue at 7.6, the very bottom two readings. Alright, compared to the same low levels right here, you were at 10 and 11. So you've already got the disparity, but the fact that you're down to 7, and you can go back through, particularly if you have the indicators to go and look at them, and you'll see when you get these kind of situations, or like the situation I showed where it went negative, um, those are just nice buy setups, particularly when you're seeing that the shakeout had not moved at all. I mean, as long as you're staying inside that negative 12, you've still got a very active interest from your buy institutions, and they're not running from a setup overall. Which a lot of people, and this was the interesting one because when this signal came in, and I was saying, they're buying, and I had a couple of comments where people said, "Who in the hell would be buying? What institution is dumb enough to be buying PCLN with that large gap hanging below them?" And I said, well, clearly these guys are because not only are they buying, but they keep accumulating into each and every one of the little dips. And that's just a reality that a lot of people are not going to be able to get because you've got to have the ability to see these fractal setups. And this is what um, StockTwits had posted on Christmas. They were talking about a TED series. And if you have Netflix, you can always go to it and watch it. That was the TED series, and they were talking about algorithms. And if you want, you can go to StockTwits and look at their December 25th feed. It was one of the few posts he made where he was talking about, because I guess he went and watched it. I had seen it a long time back. But it was good because he was referring to stealth technologies, and the concept behind the engineering was to take a large plane and break it up into what appeared to be a bunch of tiny birds in a flock. And that's exactly what these bifractal setups are. And so when you hear me refer to subsets as part of the fractals, that's what I'm looking at. These guys buy in very orderly fashion. And if you're able to see it, it becomes rather clear. It's just a matter of being able to recognize those specifics. And once you're able to see them, putting them in the dot format became a much easier way to convey it, because before, when I first came onto StockTwits and was putting up my charts, education-wise, it was very difficult to try and explain what are you looking at here with these uh, up and down lines or whatever. And so the dot fractals became an easy way to depict it. Now, is there some trouble signs on the horizon here for PCLN? Well, let's take a look. Now, when I get the yellow line below the orange, I tell you, hey, you've got to be prepared for a little bit of a retrace, and that's why in this particular spot I was looking for a discount. And this is something you will notice when you see a lot of the charts. Whenever I get yellow above the orange on these breakouts outside of the highway, and you'll often hear me refer to this expanded ratio histogram as a highway. When you get off the highway, which would be past this magenta to one side and the green to the other side, with the median being the red, you get into the shoulder. Okay, you got a little troublesome areas, but then when you get completely off, you've changed freeways. And this is where I tell people that there's a complete sentiment change as to the approach for that stock. Well, you're seeing it right here on PCLN at a time where it's appearing near overbought. -5 on that differential is getting there. So this is going to be a time where people are just going to be saying, oh yeah, I want to buy. Well, you're going to buy, and they're going to be selling into you. That's just the way it works and the way it's set up. So in this particular case, 1945 for the yellow over 1935, that's fairly close from a reading standpoint, and you're about to go green trend. But even if you go green trend, I would expect a couple of days lower. So this is probably where people are going to be, thinking to start buying some options for a move back up on PCLN. They're going to get burned this week, and that's just going to happen to them. I know that's. I shouldn't say those kinds of things because that gets too definitive for some people to talk about those kind of setups. But that's okay. I'm not hesitated from doing it in the past, and all I can do is give you what we're looking at and the overall signals. Let's see some other ones. There was Amazon signal that I posted that one earlier. Came up, hit that beautiful target from, and again, this was last week during the height of the fiscal cliff. So why were these guys buying? And why am I showing you all these charts that happen to show the exact same thing from a daily standpoint? They were all depicting exactly the same stuff. Let's look at eBay Daily. If you just want to plop in a bunch of names, I'll go ahead and run through a bunch of daily stuff, and we'll take a break and see what the market's going to do overall. eBay Daily, nice little buy setup there, dip below the blue line right here, but not down to the red line, and even left a very nice, attractive buy conversion. Surprised there's not a fractal on that setup there. Interesting. Had the GAM, but no additional buy one on that one. I think Facebook, we looked at the daily on Facebook. And bifractals last week, put them in again Monday, and that meets the targets. Positive extreme though, 8.61. So there's going to be a little bit of potential flatlining here in the next couple of days. It looks like a lot of stuff blew past it. Now let's take a look at like X. Been a big proponent of X, WLT, CLF. X put in additional bifractals on Monday, and I pointed that out to our members net, but now we've kind of popped, and boy, look at that extreme. And this would not be as big an issue if we had been in red trend and then flipped to green trend. But the fact that we're in green trend and we're getting the extremes, those are going to they're going to pull back. And look at same situation. See, notice this yellow line far below the orange. Again, you got to take that seriously. Right there, similar case. So, always good to point those details out. Let's look at CLF. CLF was a little bit earlier play, and some of these, I can't say that they start the trend, but sometimes you can capture an early concept. I mean, we were very bullish on CLF right down here in this mid-level collapse, and boy, it took off very nicely from here. But with this positive extremes, like I tell people, all right, I'm still expecting that low of 35.61 to be retraced. So a bunch of people buying in right now, they're already in trouble. I mean, it opened at 40.27. Those people are all underwater from that setup overall, and that's not good either from a daily standpoint right there. So, is that too shocking? Not really. Not really. A lot of these have had great runs, and a lot of people have been just too afraid to take the run, and that's okay. There's cautious, but it's like Facebook when I was given the buys down in the 19. People say, "Oh, well, you got the lockup," and all this. I don't look at the news. I don't follow the news for trading. Yes, I stay current with everything. I know what's going on, but that's a far cry from having an impact what I'm trading or how I'm trading it. What else can we look at from our dot alerts here? We look at V. I think that that was the same as what was going on with MasterCard. Yeah, it kind of popped up and gone excessive. Oh, Netflix, that's one I wanted to look at. Oh, speaking of formatting, this is always a good one to talk about for those that do have TradeStation that set up. Sometimes if you don't have your axis set correctly, particularly on these, if I had set the axis to one side or another, it would shrink price to where you really wouldn't be able to recognize it. So you want to make sure that you have those. Most of the colors, except for like on the orange dot, are already pre-programmed into them. And let's look at Netflix before I flip over and I'll do CMG. I guess we should look at Buffalo Wild Wings too. Alright, so Netflix, we had a short on Monday. And probably the interesting thing about this is you wouldn't get this signal until right at the close. And I know it came in for me at for after hours setup, and the expectation was is that over the last decade plus, you have not had a New Year's open that was lower. So understanding that was not a concern to wait for potential gap higher in the morning. Didn't know it was going to be this big, but fine, still able to take it. But that still leaves downside target to 88.52 for those that wanted to know. So again, this is where if you've got the indicators, you've got a huge leg up in comparison to um, just getting the dot alerts. And so it's like, to me, I know some people say, oh, I don't want to trade platforms and all this and that. Well, you don't always have to, but is it worth taking a look at something? I mean, how many days do I need to put up the charts over and over before it becomes pretty clear that it's not accidental? These setups actually exist, and they, often are directly in contrast to what technical analysis would tell us to do. And I'm the first one to admit that there are plenty of times where I'm on the same side as everybody because we're all looking at a nice setup, and again, plenty of times we get MACD buyers in alignment with our buy signals, but more often than not, we get sell signals when they're getting a buy signal, and it's a common joke I have with a lot of times where it's like, okay, MACD buyers are just about to come in, and we want to be ready to sell as price pops. And because that's what the pros do, they sell into those because, if you're trading it that way, then you're a little bit behind. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just behind. And oftentimes you'll get a couple of day retrace into an MACD buy setup before it turns around. Does it mean they're going to get stopped out? No. It just means that they were in it just a little bit past where we were getting a signal. CMG, from a daily standpoint, it had been sitting on this overall short signal, got filled right back over here, and then it was just kind of in a neutral. We really weren't overly positive on it at all. What was nice is that we had reached this down point. I think I was talking about it. We just didn't have a strong expectation that it was going to do anything in particular. So it had a nice move, carried over with the market. But yeah, if you go back and look at my comments, it was just like we really weren't having a strong feeling about it one way or another. Um, and then, I don't know. I mean, I think that's kind of reflective of it sort of being in this neutral path. It had sort of turned around. So this is the final first positive signal from it. The problem is overbought within that setup. I mean, plus 16 already, and you've gotten nothing for it. So does that still kind of hold true? So even with this huge positive move, it didn't really do a whole lot. So yeah, I think that that was probably a fair analysis. That we weren't negative, we weren't hyper bullish, we were just blah on it. I think that was fair. And it seems like that, had a nice start, but just couldn't hold any of it. And that's just one of those things. Let's see, how did our Apple 10 minute, did it ever get to its target with that short built into it? Let's see. Whipping through that, gotta find my intraday chart there. BCLN had that little gray dot right there on the 15 minute, retraced the low, so no expectation in there. There's still, and now you've gone too many bars here. This is good to point out. For this orange dot to be valid any longer. I mean, once you got past here and got the gray dot, I would have been taking that with a stop at my break even. And you probably would have been out. It just wasn't going to work out. And what you would be doing is just waiting for a new signal. And just not getting one at this particular spot. So that can happen. Alright, so here's our Apple 10 minute. Again, we had the short setup. What was it looking for? 544.63. Lowest we've got is 545.20. So no, hasn't quite hit it. Will it? Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to take a break. Hopefully that was informative. If you have got more questions on some of the indicator setups, we're going to go over them a little bit more in depth, so it'll probably be more for people who are really becoming more interested in the indicators than necessarily going over charts for price, because I want to get into some of the specifics. I'm going to bring in up down power and even our big drop signal, which not something we really talk about a whole lot, but this will give people who've been getting the indicators now, as well as those who are just starting to get them, a little bit more insight into some of the unique setups. So look for that a little bit later, and that'll be the overall setup. So hopefully that was enjoyable, and trade well. Continue to go at it, and still look for that target. Let me give it to you one more time before I close it out here. 544.63. Where are we at? 545.31. Almost $1 away. Take care.